The headlights of Jake Thompson's old truck cut through the dark like two bright beams. It was late at night, and the road ahead seemed to go on forever. Jake gripped the steering wheel tightly. His hands were tired, his stomach was empty, and his whole body ached. He had been driving for over 12 hours, hauling goods across states just to pay his bills. Stopping wasn't an option, not tonight. Jake was 26 years old, but life hadn't been easy for him. His dad died when he was young, leaving behind a lot of debt. His mom worked hard to keep them going, but it wasn't enough. By 18, Jake quit school to drive trucks full-time. It wasn't a fancy job, but it kept a roof over his head, or at least tried to. That night, though, something felt strange. Maybe it was the quiet of the empty road or the feeling that something big was about to happen. As he drove, he saw something up ahead. A figure standing next to a shiny black car parked on the side of the road. At first, he didn't understand what he was seeing. The car looked expensive, but there she was, a woman in a long coat, waving her arms wildly, trying to get his attention. Jake slowed down, unsure of what to do. "You okay?" he shouted as he stepped out of his truck. The woman turned to face him. Her blonde hair caught the moonlight, and even in the dark, Jake could tell she was beautiful, but also scared. She held her phone in one hand, but its screen was black. "Please," she said, her voice shaking. "I ran out of gas. I've been stuck here for almost an hour." Jake hesitated. Helping her would cost him time, and time meant money. But as he looked into her worried eyes, he couldn't walk away. "All right," he said with a sigh. "Let me grab a gas can from my truck." Jake rummaged through the back of his truck, searching for the small gas can he kept for emergencies. It wasn't much, just enough to get her car moving again, but it would have to do. As he worked, the woman walked closer, wrapping her coat tighter around herself against the cold. Up close, Jake noticed how tired she looked. Her makeup was smudged, and her hands trembled as she clutched her phone. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped." "No problem," Jake replied, trying to sound casual. He didn't want her to feel like she owed him anything. "Happens to everyone at some point." She gave him a weak smile, but there was something in her eyes, gratitude mixed with sadness, that made Jake curious. "What's your name?" she asked after a moment. Jake Thompson." He poured the gas into her car's tank carefully, avoiding spilling any on the ground. "And you?" "Evelyn," she said simply, not offering a last name. She seemed distracted, staring off into the distance as if lost in thought. The air between them grew quieter, filled only by the soft hum of crickets and the occasional gust of wind. Jake finished filling the tank and stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "That should be enough to get you to the next station," he told her. Evelyn nodded, still looking uneasy. "You didn't have to stop," she said suddenly, her voice firmer now. "Most people wouldn't have bothered." Jake shrugged, feeling a little awkward. "Well, I couldn't just leave you here. Not right." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than expected, as if she were studying him. Then, without warning, she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "Here," she said, handing it to him. "If you ever need anything at all, call this number. Please." Jake took the card hesitantly. It was plain white with black text. Evelyn Carter and a phone number written neatly below. There was no title or company logo, which struck him as odd. Before he could ask about it, Evelyn climbed back into her car and started the engine. "It's late," she said through the open window. "You should get going too. And thank you again, Jake." With that, she drove off, leaving Jake standing alone under the stars. He stared at the card in his hand, unsure of what to think. Something about the whole encounter felt strange, but also strangely meaningful. The next few days passed in a blur for Jake. He delivered his cargo on time, dealt with the usual headaches of his job, and tried to forget about the mysterious woman named Evelyn. But the business card she'd given him stayed tucked safely in his wallet, nagging at the back of his mind like an unanswered question. It wasn't until Friday evening, when Jake was sitting in his tiny apartment nursing a cup of instant coffee, that his phone buzzed unexpectedly. The screen lit up with an unknown number. Hesitating for just a second, he answered. "Hello, Jake? It's Evelyn Carter." Her voice was calm but unmistakably confident, sending a jolt of recognition through him. "Oh, hi," Jake stammered, caught off guard. "How are you?" "I'm fine, thank you," she replied smoothly. "I wanted to follow up on something I mentioned the other night. Do you remember our conversation?" Jake scratched the back of his neck, unsure where this was going. "Yeah, I remember. You gave me your card." "Good," Evelyn said, her tone warming slightly. "I meant what I said, Jake. I want to repay you for helping me. What you did, stopping when most people wouldn't, it meant more than you might realize." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "You don't need to do anything. Really. I was just doing what anyone should have done." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Evelyn spoke again, her voice softer now. "That's exactly why I want to help you. People like you remind me there's still goodness in the world. So here's my offer. Tomorrow morning, come to this address." She rattled off a location downtown before Jake could protest. "Just trust me, okay?" Before he could respond, she hung up, leaving Jake staring at his phone in stunned silence. "People like you." The words echoed in his head, stirring emotions he didn't know how to process. Who was this woman, and why did she seem so determined to repay him? The next morning, Jake found himself standing outside a towering glass building in the heart of the city. He felt out of place in his worn jeans and faded jacket, surrounded by sharply dressed professionals rushing past him. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside and approached the front desk. "I'm here to see Evelyn Carter," he told the receptionist nervously. Her eyes widened slightly as she nodded. "Of course, Mr. Thompson. She's expecting you. Please take the elevator to the top floor." As the elevator climbed higher, Jake's heart raced. When the doors opened, he stepped into a luxurious office suite. Evelyn stood waiting for him, looking every bit as elegant as she had on the highway. But now, she radiated power and authority. Behind her, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline. "Jake!" She greeted him warmly, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." He shook her hand awkwardly, still trying to piece everything together. "What is all this?" he asked finally. Evelyn smiled faintly. "Let's sit down. There's something I need to explain." Evelyn led Jake to a sleek conference room with plush chairs and a polished wooden table. She gestured for him to sit, her movements graceful yet deliberate. For a moment, she simply studied him, as if weighing her words carefully. "Jake," she began, leaning forward slightly, "the night you helped me wasn't just chance. It was meaningful. You see, I'm not just someone who runs out of gas on the side of the road." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I'm Evelyn Carter, CEO of Carter Enterprises. My company oversees investments, real estate, and charitable initiatives worldwide." Jake blinked, his mind struggling to process what she was saying. This woman, the one he'd thought was just another stranded traveler, was a billionaire. A literal billionaire. His jaw dropped slightly, but he quickly closed it, embarrassed. "I don't say this to impress you," Evelyn continued, her tone sincere. "I say it because I want you to understand why your kindness mattered so much. In my world, people rarely do things without expecting something in return. But you stopped because it was the right thing to do. No strings attached." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I didn't think twice about it," he admitted. "Anyone would have done the same." Evelyn shook her head firmly. "No, Jake, not everyone would. And that's why I want to give you an opportunity. An opportunity to change your life." She slid a folder across the table toward him. Inside were documents outlining a generous grant program designed to support hardworking individuals like Jake. The details were staggering. Financial assistance to pay off his debts, funding for further education or training, and even access to mentorship programs within her company. "This isn't charity," Evelyn clarified, seeing the shock on his face. "It's an investment in you, in your potential. I believe people like you can make a difference in the world." All I ask is that you use this chance wisely and, when you're able, pay it forward." Jake stared at the papers, his heart pounding. He felt a lump rise in his throat as emotions swirled inside him. Gratitude, disbelief, and a flicker of hope he hadn't felt in years. I don't know what to say," he managed finally. "You don't have to decide right now," Evelyn said gently. "Take some time to think about it. But know this: good actions create ripples, Jake. What you did for me that night, it reminded me of the kind of world I want to live in, a world where kindness matters. And I want to help you build that world too." Over the next few weeks, Jake accepted Evelyn's offer and began transforming his life. With her support, he paid off his debts, enrolled in online courses to earn certifications in logistics management, and even started volunteering at local shelters to help others facing hardships similar to his own. Each step forward filled him with a sense of purpose he'd never known before. One evening, as he drove home from delivering supplies to a community center, Jake reflected on how far he'd come. He thought about Evelyn's words, that small acts of kindness could spark big changes, and realized they weren't just true for him. They were true for everyone. Months passed, and Jake's life transformed in ways he never imagined. The once struggling truck driver was now a logistics coordinator at a thriving company, one of Evelyn's trusted partners. His days were no longer filled with endless highways and sleepless nights, but instead with meaningful work that allowed him to support others. He had moved into a modest yet comfortable apartment, paid off his debts, and even started saving for the future. But more than anything, Jake felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Every time he helped someone, a coworker struggling with a project, a neighbor needing groceries, or a stranger stranded on the side of the road, he remembered Evelyn's words. Kindness creates ripples, and those ripples were spreading farther than he could have dreamed. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Jake walked through the bustling streets of downtown, he spotted a familiar figure standing near a cafe. It was Evelyn. She looked just as poised and elegant as ever, her blonde hair catching the sunlight. When she saw him, her face lit up with a warm smile. "Jake!" she called out, waving him over. "It's been too long." Jake approached, feeling a mix of excitement and gratitude. "Evelyn, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to check in," she said simply, gesturing for them to sit at a nearby table. "How have things been going?" Jake hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. "Honestly, better than I ever thought possible. You gave me a second chance, not just financially but emotionally too. I feel like I'm finally living the life I was meant to." Evelyn nodded, her expression softening. "That's all I hoped for. Seeing people succeed because they chose kindness. It's why I do what I do. But tell me, Jake, how are you paying it forward?" He smiled, thinking about the countless moments over the past months when he'd gone out of his way to help others. "I've been volunteering at shelters, mentoring kids who need guidance, and even helping coworkers get back on their feet after tough times. It's amazing how one act of kindness can inspire so many others." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, visibly pleased. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Karma isn't just about rewards. It's about creating a cycle of goodness. What you put out into the world comes back to you tenfold." They sat there for a while longer, talking about life, dreams, and the power of compassion. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden hues across the city, Jake realized something profound. Evelyn hadn't just changed his life. She had shown him the true value of humanity. Before parting ways, Evelyn handed him another card, this one embossed with her company logo. "If you ever need anything else, or if you want to collaborate on projects that give back, don't hesitate to reach out." Jake took the card, holding it tightly. "Thank you, Evelyn, for everything." She smiled warmly. "No, Jake, thank you. You reminded me why I believe in people." As Jake watched her walk away, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be. But he knew one thing for certain. Every choice mattered. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, could change someone's world, including his own. And as he stepped back onto the busy street, ready to face whatever came next, Jake couldn't help but smile. The road ahead might still hold challenges, But he was no longer afraid, because now he understood the truth beyond words. Kindness always finds its way back home.